for Impact.
Welcome to the 27th episode of Brace for Impact, covering all things Impact Wrestling. As always, live from No Sale Studios, I'm the Ace of Tavern, Acefield Retro, and joined on this Thursday evening with that mullet.mania himself, Colton. Jesse, what's up, dude?
What's going on, man? Got a fresh fade on the waterfall today. Got cleaned up just in time for Christmas, which is, geez, man, 4 days away. It's hard to believe. Are you wrapped up on all your shopping?
All shopping's done. Wrapping is not wrapped at all. I'm sitting next to all the presents that are waiting to be wrapped in here, put under the tree, but getting ready for the day. And what a week it was in pro wrestling. And of course, we're saying goodbye to Impact Wrestling. And if you guys recognize, as we've been saying week after week, Impact Wrestling has been getting ready, biding time for TNA Wrestling in the changeover. And we're looking at really a few weeks of punting of, some programming that leaves a lot to be desired, but we're sitting here off a best of part 1 episode, of course, playing through the match of the year and what a year it was. And next week, we'll give a little bit of the superlatives, talking about specifically Impact Wrestling, what we thought was the best of the promotion of the year. But your thoughts on them doing this? And I mean, this seems like we said, the roadmap seems all roads lead to Las Vegas for Hard to Kill.
Yeah, man. I mean, this, I feel like with the best of episode this week, that was the most logical choice for, we were talking last week how the biding time and the punting episodes, they've all been like slightly different. They haven't given us the same thing, and it hasn't just been a recap episode or a highlight reel every single week. I appreciate and want to commend Impact for being able to keep it just a little bit different, even though it wasn't what we're used to seeing from them, here for the last, month and a half. So I'm excited for the new year, man. I mean, yeah, all eyes are headed to Vegas. We still have, we'll have a week, right, of TV after the first of the year. I'm assuming, or maybe even 2. Yeah, it would technically be 2 Thursdays before January 13th, Hard to Kill at Vegas. I'm hoping we're going to get, TNA branded TV. I'm hoping we're not going to get a couple more punt episodes there. I mean, they did say January 1st we're back, so I'm hoping we get to see a little bit of a sneak peek of the new brand coming up here in the next couple of weeks. But yeah, I mean, I'm not. There would have been a lot worse ways to handle this transition period than the way that they have. I think they've done a good job with what they were with what they're dealt. And they're putting all of their resources and their energy in the right place. It's going to pay off. We're not going to be disappointed by this product that we're getting to see in the new era of TNA.
Yeah, and then a lot of promotions are doing the same thing. Obviously, Raw coming up on this week on Christmas is going to be a best of episode. Allegedly, they're going to revamp for 2024 with the day 1 episode of Raw headlined by Drew McIntyre versus Seth Rollins for the World Heavyweight Championship. So a lot of promotions are doing that, and usually this is what would happen at the end of the year. But I think all roads, like you said, lead to Vegas, and we're sitting here off of a lot of good news. And of course, we'll get into all the news happening in that universe, because it seems like every day it's either someone had signed with TNA, someone's re-signed, and this roster is really taking shape. I know a lot of people, it washes over people when you see the headlines, like we saw some news drop today during the episode of some re-signings, but these re-signings are just as important as the free agent signings, because they're locking up talent that have been essential to the success of Impact Wrestling. Because although we're switching over to TNA Wrestling, everybody's excited about it, don't for a second take for granted how great Impact Wrestling has been 2022, 2023. Momentum's going in the same direction, and it's because of the roster they constructed. So I'm glad a lot of these guys are staying.
Yeah, me too, man. Very happy to see. I feel like a lot of people see the re-sign and like, oh, that's not news. But no, man, I'm excited to see everybody that's hitched their wagon to the new era of TNA. It's good. I mean, I don't want to lose anybody. There's not really anybody on the roster that I'm like, what, we don't need them. Let's go ahead and cut them. I'm happy to see anyone and everyone that's re-signing.
Well, let's get to the inside, talk about all those signings that happened, talk about all the news that kind of bridged the gap, because a week's been a long time here in the universe of Impact Wrestling. A lot of news has dropped. Let's get to the insight.
The insight.
All right, here we are on the Insight, the news section, of course, talking about all things Impact/TNA Wrestling. We're going to start with the news story that dropped last week, just as we went off air, talking about El Hijo del Vikingo setting to return to TNA Wrestling for the first time since 2020. So it was revealed during Thursday's Hidden Gems edition of Impact, the AAA Mega Champion, Elio del Vikingo, will participate in both the Hard to Kill pay-per-view, but also the Snake Eyes tapings happening in Vegas January 13th and 14th. This lineup, Colton, is taking shape right now. We got Okada, we got Will Ospreay, and the list goes on and on. But your thoughts on Vikingo? Of course, we've seen a lot of them throughout 2023 on the main stage, AEW most notably. But Vikingo is a fresh face we're seeing for the first time in about 4 years in this promotion.
Yeah, man, I'm super excited to see him on this card. I mean, this, like you said, it's starting to take shape. This card's already stacked as it is, but I mean, Elio del Vikingo, man, I mean, he's one of the best doing it today. I don't think you could. I think you'd be hard pressed to make an argument that he's outside of the top 10, top 15 wrestlers going for sure right now, period, of any style. Like, the guy's just absolutely incredible at what he can do. I think this adds another, this is an already prestigious card. I mean, this adds another level of star power for me, man, definitely. Because I mean, the kid's young, but you think about 20, like where he was and his name recognition in 2020 versus where he is now, man. I mean, this is a big get for this card, and I'm excited to see him be a part of it.
Yeah, and I think he's grown a lot, as you said, in the last 4 years. He's a lot to show. And I think the emphasis on the Impact promotion this year, especially, has been on Lucha Libre. The relationship with AAA, we're seeing Black Taurus, even saw Juventud Guerrera Bound for Glory. There's a lot of emphasis on this style, and it's something we've been asking for. And I think they did a good job of highlighting. And who better than Vikingo, who right now might be top 1 or top 2 Lucha Libre stars in all of pro wrestling right now. And I mean, like we just said, he's the AAA Mega Champion right now. Of course, he's having great matches all over the world, but this is just another addition to the card. And his opponent hasn't been mentioned yet, and we also haven't really talked about who it possibly could be. If you had an idea, it seems like to me it will be probably a tag team match of some capacity. Of course, Okada, he's involved in a multi-man match, and we know Will Ospreay is going to be taking on Josh Alexander. But knee-jerk reaction, no one putting you on the spot. But for Vikingo, who would you like to see him work, on the Impact roster?
I mean, I'd like to see him go up one-on-one against Juventud, man. That would be incredible to me. And I mean, I know, Juvi's not a full-on TNA signee yet, but we got to see him at Bound for Glory, and I think doors always open. I would love to see. I mean, that would be a dream match for me to see them one-on-one. But if I had to pick somebody off the TNA roster, man, I'd love to see him go one. I know you said it makes more sense to be a tag match most likely, but I'd love to see him go one-on-one up against Speedball Mike Bailey.
I could definitely see that stealing the show. Of course, we have, like we said, Okada is going to team with Alex Shelley and Chris Sabin of the Motor City Machine Guns, and they're going to take on Moose, Eddie Edwards, and Brian Myers. We have 2 nights of tapings for Vikingo. He potentially could have a marquee matchup against the likes of someone like Speedball Mike Bailey, and then maybe have a tag match on the Snake Eyes tapings. But I think Speedball is probably the answer. And I like the Hoovy piece here. Maybe they put in a dream match, and there's all these pieces of the card that have yet to come together, and they've had to be creative because, as we mentioned before, over and over again, there hasn't been a lot of live programming, so they're fitting in the build of the show in between the Thanksgiving episode and also the best of the Hidden Gems and announcing these matches. The build still feels there. The main matches have been announced for months and months at this point. We've known Moose is going to challenge for the the world championship at this point. We've known it for a while, but the thing with Vikingo is, he's just another addition. I'm looking forward to watching this card take shape and just announcing all these guys. It feels like a super card that's really developing here for Vegas.
Yeah, man, absolutely. A super card is a good way to put it. This is going to be, and what a way to kick off the year, man. I mean, there's not really, they're not for the month of January. I mean, yeah, we have the Rumble, but I mean, this is for this level of card, man. I mean, they're really kind of unchallenged by any other promotion for this month. So, I mean, that's, it's pretty exciting. It's going to be, I don't think they're going to have very much difficulty getting a lot of eyes from pro wrestling fans on Hard to Kill, because there's, like I said, besides the Rumble, January is oftentimes kind of a down month for a lot of promotions. So it's, this is going to be cool, man. It's good timing. It's a good card. And I'm interested to see, I mentioned this when they first announced Hard to Kill. The only thing that makes me nervous about it is the fact that it's in Vegas. And, historically, Vegas is not the best town for wrestling, but it's been planned long enough. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of butts and seats, but I'm just, Vegas is not, when I think Wrestling Town, Vegas is not the first place that I think of. But I think there's enough buzz around this event that we're not going to end up in a situation where we were like Double or Nothing this year with AEW, where the crowd just, even though there were bodies there, man, they just didn't seem that into it. So I don't think with this card there'd be any way you get people in the building and not be into it. You could get somebody who's never seen a wrestling match in their life come across this card and probably be an instant fan.
Yeah, and I think the thing with TNA is there's going to be definitely initial eyes on the product. And it's about that first impression and keeping fans there. So this is them showing up at the party, being best dressed, and they want everyone to recognize them as they walk through the door. And Hard to Kill, as we mentioned, the cards coming together. We have the 2 title matches headlining. And of course, Alex Shelley is going to be defending the TNA World Championship against Moose. Trinity defending the Knockouts World title against Jordan Grace. But we also talked about Chris Sabin. And of course, he's going to be defending his X Division Championship against 2 challengers at Hard to Kill. So it was announced that Chris Sabin will put his X Division title on the line against Kushida and Vikingo in a 3-way match at Hard to Kill on Saturday, January 13th. So the pay-per-view is taking place at the Palms Casino and Resort in Las Vegas. We mentioned last week Kushida was the newest signing here, and he is someone that, obviously has been a featured point. He obviously has a relationship with Alex Shelley and Chris Sabin, but the fact that he's here in a big spot, there's a chance he takes this title off Chris Sabin, especially as a nice thank you for signing. And he's a guy who can build some stories around. I'm really excited to see what these 3 guys can mix it up. I know we were talking about Vikingo before. I guess they had announced it. We were, I guess, more conjecturing about what he's going to do at the Snake Eyes tapings, but that remains to be seen as far as who's going to walk out with the title. And it feels like a guy like Kushida could take it away.
Yeah, man. I mean, it makes a lot more sense to me for the belt to go on to Kushida than on to Vikingo, especially, Vikingo still running him around with the AAA belt. I think Kushida's a great, you can make a great case for him taking the X Division title here, man, because he's been so damn close to it in the last 6 months, more than one time, winning the Ultimate X match and being and challenging, man. I mean, he's had 2 opportunities where he's been so damn close. I like that this is going to be a triple threat match. I'm excited that, I mean, don't get me wrong, any X Division title, man, the level of action that we see in them one-on-one is always great, but being able to make this a triple threat match makes it just that more interesting. And with these 3 guys, man, I mean, this is a dream triple threat. This Chris Sabin, Kushida, and Elijo del Vikingo. I mean, these are the kinds of people that the X Division was built for. I mean, this is going to be a great match.
Yeah, and the X Division is something that, of course, something different that promotions are not able to keep up with. And it's something that TNA was built on. The core of the TNA's fan base recognized the X Division, and maybe some of those lapsed fans are coming back to check it out and seeing, I mean, who better than Chris Sabin in his 10th reign with the championship? Of course, he won the title back in September against Leo Rush, and what a reign it's been for a guy like Chris Sabin. So he can bridge that gap from the casual fan to the hardcore, and he's a familiar face. He's like a warm hug walking into the room. You see him. If you haven't watched TNA in 10 years, it's like Chris Sabin's still doing it at the highest level. It's got to be amazing for a fan to see.
Yeah, and he also, not only is he still doing it at the highest level, dude doesn't look like he's aged hardly a day, man. I mean, when we went back and watched the Thanksgiving episode a few weeks back, I mean, you can see a little bit more, a little bit more baby in the face there, man. But the guy still looks like $1 million.
Well, they posted a photo today, Alex Shelley, and I think it was a shared post with him and Chris Sabin, and they said what a year 2023 has been. And it was like this selfie in the gym or whatever, and they both were shirtless, showing off their abs. And for their age, man, they're in the best shape that they've ever been in, both Alex Shelley and Chris Sabin. So it's going to be a year, man. I think they're motivated as the whole roster is, and they're leading by example at the highest level. And they deserve it, man, because they've been through the hard times and they've been with the promotion for a very long time. And what they're transferring over, this means a lot. Although Hard to Kill, we've been predicting that potentially Moose is going to take the title of Alex Shelley. What a stamp of approval and a stamp of honor for a guy like Alex Shelley to walk into the rebranded TNA. To be the first guy walking out with that TNA World Championship, even if he loses it that night. What a badge of honor to hold as they transition to the new era of TNA, especially where they used to be. He saw a lot of different crowds in Universal and otherwise, some down times for the promotion, but this might be the highest of highs for them.
Oh, absolutely, man. And yeah, I can't think of anybody better to walking in as the champion as Shelley. It'll be interesting to see, man. We've been told that we're going to get new belts at the pay-per-view. I wonder if they'll have Shelley walk to the ring with the new world title, or if it'll just be presented to the winner. So that'll be I hadn't thought about that yet.
I'd imagine they're probably going to have it one of those things where maybe Scott D'Amore has it in the ring and
on a
I don't know, but
pedestal.
it's a tough decision to make. Do you have Shelley walk out with it, and then it's almost like you should just wait for whoever wins that match, and that's as far as lineage goes, you cut it off at the middle and say Moose is the first TNA World Champion of the new era, and then split it in half. Obviously, you want to keep the legacy of the title, but it'd probably be a tough sell to have him walk out with the title just to lose it later. I don't know,
just to give it away, yeah.
But who knows? I mean, we're excited for what the title is going to look like, of course, because we know they're, those old school TNA championships are something to behold. And, they've done a great job. Even the ones now are great. So I'm interested to see what they do. Maybe they stick with the same championship with the plates and just put the TNA logo on it. But that old school TNA World Championship, kind of want them to bring it back. And Moose was the guy who's most synonymous with it, in my opinion. So it'd be great to see him with it.
Absolutely, man. I mean, it doesn't have to look the exact same. You could bring it back and, or bring a new belt that is pretty much based off that old TNA heavyweight championship. I think it speaks volumes. We talked about how, Scott D'Amore had said that the name change had been in the works for almost a year and it had never been leaked. The fact that we know there's new belts coming and there's been no leaks whatsoever. I'm excited and I'm happy there's been no leaks. I love a good surprise. And I think that speaks volumes to the type of company and the type of ship that they run at Impact TNA. But damn it, dude, I want to see these belts. I'm just itching to see them, man. I can't wait. I'm really, that's honestly, that's probably the thing I'm most excited about as far as reveals go for this new era.
You're so right, man. I think that's a really good point to think about, is that the locker room, there's been one release. A company had to have outsourced at this point and ship them. They have to be ready, right? And they had to have had the design, at the very least, a blueprint of these championships, and nowhere to be found. I haven't even seen an inkling of a conversation about what these potential. I haven't even seen a demo or a draft of what fans would like to see. It just leaves it out there. And I know there's a lot of different models of these championship belts that we can go back and reference, and maybe they go with the historic reference or go with something brand new. All I know is their legacy of championships, sneaky good as far as aesthetics go. Like, they really have a great run of just amazing championship belts. Go back to when Kurt Angle was the TNA champion.
Yeah.
That belt was, looks prestigious, looked big, looked honorable, carried to the ring. I don't know where they go with this, but I'm very excited to see exactly what happens. And that, seeing those classic 3 letters of TNA across the front of a big belt, it's going to be kind of, it's going to be weird because it's been so long at this point.
Yeah. And I feel like, this, we spoke about when they first made the announcement for the name change. It's like, this is them fully embracing their history, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And it means something a lot more now. They've done the hype and the energy built around the rebrand. I mean, it's a much bigger deal this many years down the road, to me at least.
And then this is definitely the biggest story going into 2024. You mentioned the headline of the wrestling world is in the spotlight, has to be on TNA coming into 2024, because I think there's a lapse and break in time after the holidays for everyone to get ready and geared up wrestling wise for the Royal Rumble. And I think that will obviously take center stage. But all eyes of the wrestling world are going to be in Vegas on this pay-per-view and watching to see what TNA brings to the table. That's exciting to me because we're so used to it being WWE has a spotlight, AEW, and switching back and forth who signed a big free agent. It's refreshing to me that TNA is going to be showcased on this stage. It feels like a big event. And I know you and I are covering it so closely. It's almost just this recency bias for us to sit here and talk about how important it is. But you feel the tangible buzz among wrestling fans about how big this feels. And I think the fact that it's happened in the beginning of 2024, in that lull of a wrestling period where everyone's waiting for the Rumble to happen, it's the perfect time and perfect storm. And I think they're going to knock it out of the park.
Yeah, man, I do too. I've got full faith in them with it being an absolute home run.
So looking into the re-signings, we talked about all these guys re-signing. We're going to start with the one that was announced late last week, and it was announced on Thursday that Eddie Edwards has re-signed with TNA Wrestling. And of course, he's been with the promotion for almost a decade at this point, making his debut in 2014. 2-time Impact World Champion, a 5-time Impact Tag Team Champion, 2-time X Division Champion. And he spoke with PW Insider talking about this signing. And the other thing I like before I get into the quote, Colton, was they're treating these signings with these news sources, whether it be Sports Illustrated or PW Insider, getting quotes almost like this press release from a sports franchise. And that's the vibe I'm getting from all these announcements. Even though these guys have been on the roster, it's expected. Where else is Eddie Edwards going to go? He's a TNA lifer. they were treating it with prestige and with honor to announce this, even with the graphic on Instagram and seeing the news drop on the website. Your thoughts on how they were doing this?
I like it, man. And I think this is kind of it feels like this is almost the new normal to announce any sort of signing. And I mean, I think it kind of this model of like the graphic on social media kind of started with AEW, and they're like, so and so is All Elite. And I've always liked that aspect. And I appreciate that this is kind of getting normalized across multiple promotions, because it makes it feel like a big deal, man. It definitely gives it some gravity. And yeah, I mean, I love it. Anything that makes this, anything we can do to make this industry feel, more, because I mean, at the end of the day, it is call it sports entertainment, call you what it want. It is a sport, and anything that make it feel more legitimate is always good in my book.
So, like I said, Eddie Edwards spoke with PW Insider about his new deal. He said, I don't think it's much of a surprise. He continued, I don't think my fans and friends are surprised I'm sticking around, because everybody knows how I feel about this company. He finished saying, I think especially now with our momentum with TNA coming back and all that excitement, it was a no-brainer for me. And I'm very happy to be here and continue being here as long as possible. As we know, Eddie Edwards is such an essential part, not only in the ring, but out of the ring, his mind for the business. He's been through a lot of things with this promotion, similar to a guy like Chris Sabin. These guys, like, I know the word pillar is overused, but these legacy guys in TNA are so important because they bridge the gap from the past to the present, even to the future. And to see a guy like Eddie Edwards, again, going back to the lapsed fan that's tuning in for the first time because those three letters are there, to see a guy who's synonymous, a former world champion multiple times over, to see Eddie Edwards there, that's going to help bring those fans and keep them there, and maybe be introduced to the new talent and be excited for him. And just also, I mean, keeping that locker room, in sync with where it's been. Because as you mentioned, even the small pieces with the news not leaking, we know that's a sign of a healthy locker room. But he's a guy who's leading by example, and you want to keep everything very much the same. Just because they're switching over to TNA, they need to keep exactly that blueprint, that roadmap they've used to get Impact back to the level where people would be excited about something like this. Because I think Impact Wrestling really carry them across the finish line. They walk so that TNA in the future can run.
Very well said, man. And I'm very excited to see Eddie Edwards sticking with, like he said, not a surprise, but I think that he's a staple of this company at this point, man. I mean, like you said, he's been with the company over a decade. He's a lifer. I mean, I expect him to retire from TNA. I fully expect him to end up in the Hall of Fame. And yeah, I mean, this is it's like you said, man, the blueprint's laid. Like, we didn't get to this point. We're not just abandoning the ship and, scrapping what Impact has been for the last couple of years that has gotten us to this point. We're following, we're taking that roadmap and we're taking it to the next level. Like you said, man, it walks so we can run here. And yeah, we don't want to reinvent the wheel going into this. We want to go with what's worked and kick it up a notch. So yeah, I'm really glad to see that Eddie Edwards, among many others, are sticking around and continuing to be a part of this great roster.
The thing I can hope for is that Eddie Edwards is featured in a better way in 2023. I think a lot of the year he had spent feuding with Frankie Kazarian in those matches that you and I became exhausted with that feud. It eventually kind of ended in October with the 2 out of 3 falls match that, I liked in the beginning. They had some momentum and it just felt like overdone. And a guy like Eddie Edwards, even Frank Kazarian, both those guys could be featured in other programs. And I just felt it was almost just maybe comparatively to the other stuff going on the card, maybe it just wasn't hitting for me. But a guy like Eddie Edwards should be featured at the top of the card. And, I also like the way he was featured with teaming with Brian Myers at Final Resolution. I enjoyed that. So having him featured in big spots to help enhance talent, I'm not saying to use him as a guy to put other guys over, because I think he still could be a top guy when needed. I think he could eventually feud with a Moose if he's champion, similar to what we were talking about before. I think these guys lined up with the legacy of TNA to challenge for championships on these pay-per-views, heat them up and get them ready to go. So I'm looking at Eddie Edwards as a very important sneaky signing to keep him here. It was not expected he'd go anywhere else, but these signings are just as important as locking up the free agents, eventually pursuing the Dolph Ziglers, the Mustafa Ali's, the Rick Boogs, like those guys. Before you dip into the pot of the free agents, you got to kind of handle in-house and get these guys to stay. And Eddie Edwards was, to me, top of the list.
Yeah, he's a cornerstone, man. You gotta have him. The foundation would change if we don't have him on this roster.
So we also had other signings here, and of course we want to stick with the Knockouts division. So Danny Luna had signed a TNA wrestling contract. She's 24 years old. She's from the UK, and she made her debut back in May, so she impressed a lot of fans, obviously impressed a lot of the higher up in Impact / TNA, and she was brought into promotion with Subculture. So we covered Mark Andrews and Flash Morgan Webster at length here in 2023, obviously being former tag team champions. But we saw some tweets going out about Dani Luna, and we had Mark Andrews out there saying, so proud of Dani Luna. She's about to show the world just how good she is. Keep flying that Subculture flag in TNA for us. We also had, Flash Morgan Webster out there saying, hardest worker in any room. Can't wait for Dani Luna to show the world what we already know. Dani Luna is inevitable. So we also know her history. She was previously signed to WWE. She was a part of that WWE UK roster. She was released during some of those mass releases during August 2022. But she's still kind of kicking it on the independent scene. She's Revolution Pro's undisputed British women's champion right now. She's still kicking it up at Rev Pro. And, the fact that, again, they're trying to secure the future. So as important as it is, as we mentioned with Eddie Edwards, a young building block, 24 years old, the future is so bright. They're showing why the Knockouts division is going to continue to be the best and premier women's division in all pro wrestling, and starts with the future. I mean, Dani Luna with this division, 24 years old, she's already so impressive.
Yeah, man. What I've seen of Dani Luna's work, I've been very impressed with. Great signing. I knew she was young, man. I don't think I realized she was 24 until reading this report. That's awesome. I mean, she's got a long, very successful career ahead of herself, and what a great place to be, man. Like we talked, she was on the NXT UK roster. I mean, dude, like you said, the Knockouts division, it doesn't get any better than that in professional wrestling for women's wrestling. Knockouts division is bar none, I think, the best thing going. You'd be hard pressed to argue that it's not. And for her to be signed at 24, I mean, dude, in 5 years' time, man, I mean, she's going to be a household name with women's wrestling. Just watch.
Yeah, and like I said too, one of the biggest drawing cards for TNA and for this roster to be securing their contracts there is not only the platform they're going to be on and being a part of this locker room and working with this talent, it's the opportunity to work with other promotions. And of course, her relationship with Rev Pro is stated here. It's where she likes to sow her craft, and she just won that Rev Pro championship against Alex Windsor last weekend. So clearly she wants to continue to make those dates. And that's the attractive nature of being able to have this tape and bulk type of setting for TNA. And you're going to be able to work these other dates and still be able to hone those skills in other promotions. And Dani Luna is just going to get better and better over time. And that UK market, they're just churning out wrestler after wrestler. And it just, it starts and ends with, guys like Will Ospreay. But the future of someone like Dani Luna, and like you mentioned before, the Knockouts division continues to prosper. And it's kind of a next man up type of mentality for this division. And as we watch them bloom, really other promotions need to use the roadmap. I know, I always bring it back to baseball, but looking at the mindset of all these teams using analytics, a lot of the other rosters, promotions, WWE, AEW specifically, that maybe their women, wrestling kind of suffers as far as being showcased, and they don't know how to get it off the ground and get people to understand why it's important. Just watch weeks and weeks of Impact Wrestling and see what they've done. Go back into the legacy of TNA wrestling, because while we were getting sort of this exposed version of women's wrestling where they, we were waiting to move into the progressive mindset of where women's wrestling is now and still growing, TNA was doing it already. As we were talking about before, like we have, WWE still doing the bra and panties matches and things like that, while TNA was paving the road of this division of what it's going to be. And the women's revolution that WWE wants to put their stamp of approval on started in TNA. Like, I don't want to hear revisionist history. It started in TNA. I don't care if they put a pay-per-view on it with WWE and have an all-women's pay-per-view. That revolution was started in TNA, and it still continues there.
Yeah, 100%, man. And that's another reason that I think that just, add it to the long list of reasons why this rebrand is such a good idea, is it really brings full circle, like you said, the prestige and the history of the Knockouts division, and being able to put the TNA name back on it, I think is rightfully where it belongs.
So I'm excited to see what Dani Luna does, and we'll see her featured in big way. And I would not be shocked to see her win the Knockouts championship in 2024. I think that's how highly they think of her, and it won't be long until we see her featured. And we look at this roster from up and down. There's a reason to be excited for this Knockouts division. There's the veterans there, of course. It starts with Trinity, who's carrying that flag and continue to run with it. But someone like Danny Luna, it's like how could you not be excited about where they're going?
Yeah, it's the future is very bright, man, for the Knockouts division.
So speaking of the Knockouts division, for the second time ever, TNA Wrestling will present a Knockouts Ultimate X match. So we're going to be getting this at the Palms Casino Resort in Las Vegas, Hard to Kill 2024. We have not been announced the participants, of course, but the winner will become the number one contender to the Knockouts champion. Obviously, we don't know if Trinity is going to be the champion coming out of Hard to Kill. Maybe Jordan Grace is the champion, but they're going to be putting high stakes on this. We're going to be having a lot of appeal to this match, and you go back to that first ever Knockouts Ultimate X match, Colton, we have Tasha Steelz winning that first one in 2022. Jordan Grace participated in that. Chelsea Green, Alicia Edwards. We had Lady Frost in there and Rosemary. So some of those names might be repeat. Obviously, Jordan Grace has bigger fish to fry, of course, in that championship match. But maybe we'll see Alicia back out there. But maybe we'll see someone like Masha Slamovich out there in this match. And, man, we know how great the Ultimate X match and it's important to have this feature on this card because this was something in 2003 when it first came in. It's become a signature match. And to see now the women get their platform on this, man, with the X suspended above the middle of the ring, it's going to be exciting.
Yeah, man, I love an Ultimate X match. You really just anytime you give me an excuse for one, I'm gonna bite. It doesn't matter how well or how poorly it's set up, but this one's gonna be awesome. And like you said, some of those names probably reappear. Man, Tasha Steelz is one that I expect to. We've seen a little bit from her after she's after the 1000th episode, she's made her way back, and she looks good. I think we'll definitely see a fair amount from her in the new era in 2024. Yeah, man, I just love an Ultimate X match. And it's been, it'd be right at a year, or actually, I guess, wow, it'd be 2 years. Yeah, it's Hard to Kill 2022. So yeah, 2 years too long, man, for us to have a Knockouts Ultimate X. It's something we should see a little bit more of. I'd like to see that become an annual thing.
Absolutely. And I think it's not announced yet, but I imagine the men's side will be announced as well because the card's coming together. We mentioned before that it's difficult at least to have this build because they don't have the live programming we've been so used to. But the card right now, just to run through it, obviously mentioned before the Impact World Championship, Alex Shelley against Moose. Mentioned before the Knockout Championship, Trinity against Jordan Grace. The X Division Championship, Chris Sabin against Kushida and Vikingo. We had this Knockouts Ultimate X match to the fold. I'd imagine we're getting the men's side. I'm not saying they have to do the counterpart, but I would imagine you want as many people on the card as possible. Or do you think having two Ultimate X matches on the same card be too much?
I don't think it'd necessarily be too much, man. Especially, just depends on what all else they've got for this card that we don't know about yet. But if you already got the rig for the Ultimate X set up above the ring, why not get your money's worth and go ahead and get two out of it, man? Yeah, you don't pack that around for every show. So yeah, you don't have to twist my arm to watch two Ultimate X matches in one night.
So we'll obviously keep you guys up to date on as the Hard to Kill card comes together, and we'll add more matches as it goes. Stay tuned to Here on Brace for Impact. Post it on Instagram as well at Turnbuckle Tavern to give you guys the updated card because, right now, it's going to be a festival of wrestling. So we're going to get more matches announced, and I'm sure we're getting the Digital Media Championship defended. I'm sure we're going to get the Knockouts Tag Team Championship defended. Oh, yeah, the men's tag team titles being defended as well. They didn't announce ABC versus the Rascals yet, but that has to be happening. They've been teasing that, and I'm almost positive they said something about it last week, but it's not officially on the website, so I couldn't announce it as being part of the main card.
That's where we're going, though, 100%. It's just they haven't made it official just yet, but we know after final resolution, there's no way that's not where we're headed.
So we also continue with the re-signings here, and Brian Myers is sticking around for the new era of TNA Wrestling. So it was confirmed on Tuesday that Brian Myers had signed and inked a new TNA Wrestling contract. Of course, he's been involved with Impact since his release from WWE in 2020. Of course, we can go back to a time in TNA with 2015. So he does have a legacy with TNA, but most notably the Brian Myers that we've known to love is this one that's been here since 2020. He spoke at Sports Illustrated. So we got the Eddie Edwards interview with PW Insider giving some quotes, but Brian Myers got the rub from Sports Illustrated here and talked about how this is really an easy decision. The quote was, "This is the most fun I've had in my entire career. The past 3.5 years, it's been a perfect fit. I get to be the best version of myself while being a TNA wrestling star. So this decision was pretty easily for me." Well, Brian Myers is a guy you and I have circled in 2024 of, I wouldn't use the word breakout because I think he's already established himself as a main eventer, cultivating mass, putting on size like a main event guy, but also being featured in the top of the card. I think to me, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Do we see him feuding with Moose once he wins the championship? I mean, he talked about wanting to win the championship, and I'll get to that quote in a second. This is the perfect fit for him. And I think really he continues to really move towards the goal of being a top guy. And I think he's changed everyone's perception of this Kurt Hawkins gimmick that is long ago. He's more of the Brian Myers, similar how Matt Cardona changed the way everyone perceives him. Brian Myers did the exact same thing over in TNA.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, this is another re-signing that I don't think anyone was terribly surprised about, but something re-signing that we should all be super grateful for, because Myers is a main event guy, and like you said, he's completely transformed his presentation of himself and his perception of himself from the fans. And I think you're right when you say like we shouldn't use the term breakout, because he is already so well established. But I mean, I think this is 2024 or just the next 12 months, whether it's within 2024 or in the early months of 2025, the next calendar year is when Brian Myers gets his due, man. The guy's long overdue to be a world champion. And, like I said, we don't know what these belts look like yet, but no matter what it looks like, it's going to look good around his waist.
So the other conversation that we need to have, especially about TNA and why it's attractive for free agents or existing wrestlers to stay with the company, we talked about the ability to work across different promotions, work independent dates. But the other thing that's a big thing, especially if you're looking at the Brian Myers portfolio, is this Major Wrestling Figure podcast and the fact that how successful it is. It is a huge piece of his revenue, I'm sure. It's a big piece of his popularity. He still gets to create and have the creative control to do that without having a company like WWE going in there and having their hand in it. And conversations over and over again. I'm sure if Cardona and Myers went over to WWE, they would want WWE being that would want a hand in producing it, making sure that it is a propaganda machine and they couldn't say certain things. And, we kind of see the edge of a lot of shows get taken off. I know when they did Something to Wrestle with Bruce Pritchard, and they did it on the network for a bit, that show had no teeth. And even now it has no teeth because he is a paid employee of WWE. But with the show for Major Wrestling Figure podcast, we have the same energy, the same organic value of this show. He's still able to do those things, and there's no stopping him from making the outside endeavor. I mean, remember how ridiculous it was back in the day with WWE. They weren't allowed to be streaming video games over on Twitch. There was all the stuff with Xavier Woods. And as silly as that sounds, that's something that's an issue in WWE, but not an issue in TNA. And we're watching that kind of manifest itself where these guys can make their outside money. And the quote he had about this was very interesting. He said, with the success of the podcast and the business, it's almost like we found a cheat code in pro wrestling. In this business, decisions aren't always in your hands. You're not always doing what you want to do. He finishes saying, so this outside endeavor is a healthy balance for us, and we get to control it. It took a long time for us to figure it out, but is an incredible source of creativity. So that's a huge piece, man. Like, and I understand as a promotion, you might have reservations about letting guys either have their own podcasts. And we saw kind of with AEW how it could have negativity surround it with Dax Harwood. And when that happened, the podcast shut down. And I don't think that was an AEW decision. I'm pretty sure it was a Dax decision, but these guys are able to have these outside sources and have the creativity, like I mentioned, to work on the indies. But something like the Major Wrestling Figure podcast, that's just as important, if not as important, of where he signed, because that's a big reason why he's popular and why he makes his money.
Absolutely, man. And I think that's just a very telling sign of like why TNA is a place that people like to be, is because they're not territorial. They don't see somebody else. They don't see a creative outlet outside of the company as a threat to the company or as competition. They see it as it's an asset that somebody that works with them that they bring with them. And that's just the idea that you see it in the locker, in and outside of the locker room. TNA seems to be a place that like fosters and encourages creativity instead of how do you fit into our XYZ mold.
And not to mention too, part owner of Creative Pro Wrestling, probably the premier wrestling school, not only in the world, but across all of wrestling. Like I feel like that in the schedule piece as well, he's able to manage all of those things with the TNA schedule and still have this platform of this big promotion. It's like the perfect mix in the perfect place. Like, why would you go anywhere else?
Right. Yeah, I mean,
So
you don't see TNA being like, all right, man, well, you got to have 80% of your trainees come work at TNA
yeah.
for, like, yeah, could you imagine? Like, yeah, it's, I've always wondered how that, not to get terribly off topic, but I've wondered how that worked for Seth Rollins and, his wrestling school that he had at times. Like, well, how does WWE feel about that? Do they try to encourage him to, feed people in the performance center? Like, how does that work? But
yeah, I mean, same thing with Cody and the Nightmare Factory. Like
yeah,
all the stuff that goes on there. So yeah, I mean, that's a conversation for another time. And of course, WWE does allow outside things to go, but they're terribly nitpicky and they definitely have their hands in a lot more pots. And example being, they wanted Myers and Cardona to have this major figure wrestling podcast on their show. And I think they, for a bit, did it. I mean, I know when I'm pretty sure they did it for a bit and it definitely didn't have the same energy, or at least maybe it wasn't the same vehicle of their major wrestling figure podcast. It was a variation of it where they go figure hunting and it had the WWE gleam on it and it didn't have the same, you could tell it was overproduced and they were being told what they could and couldn't say. And the fact that these guys are still genuine who they are and they continue to churn out great content on their side of things and be, top of the line wrestlers. Like, look at what Cardona and Myers are doing. Like, are there two better guys right now doing it, with Cardona being the deathmatch king, crushing it on the indies, and Myers like crushing in his own right, reestablishing who he's are. These are two top guys where in WWE they were, the W machine tried to make them what they were and they broke that glass ceiling.
Yeah, shattered it and completely self-made themselves to what they are now.
So finishing up with Myers, he talked about being a world champion. Of course, you and I were just talking about before. I think it's an inevitable fact in 2024 he will hold TNA gold. He said, every day I show up at TNA, that is the goal, but that's not necessarily in my focus. I'm focused on controlling what I can control. That's my attitude, my work ethic, my performance in the ring, my look, eye-catching gear, all of that. Myself and Eddie Edwards have a bright future as a tag team, but I'll never lose sight of the world title. There's nothing I want more professionally. That's always my goal, and I'm working to get there. So he has his eye on the prize. I think everybody on this roster does. I think inevitably he will be world champion. I think maybe it's not that first go around with Moose, but I really think they're queuing him up. So if I was booking and if I could foresee what the future holds for TNA wrestling in the calendar year, I think Moose beats Alex Shelley. And first up, Myers and Moose had that relationship established, and there was already tension when they were teaming up, set them up for this big feud. I think it could be, those two faces on a poster, to me, sells a pay-per-view.
Yeah, same, man. Especially if you could tell such a story there with the deterioration of their friendship, and or just the fact that they remain friends, and it's a sign of just a mutual respect. There's multiple ways you could go with it, man. But yeah, just with no story whatsoever, those two guys being in a main event is enough to sell a pay-per-view.
Absolutely. And we were talking about Dave Penzer saying goodbye to Impact Wrestling, and we wasted no time. We have a new ring announcer that's going to be kicking off the era of TNA wrestling. So it was announced earlier this week that Jade Chung had been named the new ring announcer for TNA full-time. So obviously she's going to be replacing Dave Penzer, and we can eulogize Dave Penzer's career. I think he's not done in wrestling. I think inevitably he'll be back in some capacity, maybe on one-off events. We didn't get reason why he left yet, but it seemed like it was a mutual split for now. And I think maybe for big events, like I said, when we will get Dave Penzer, he's not retiring. Like, that's all he said about this. So I think the legendary voice of WCW and TNA will be back. But as far as Jade Chung goes, she gets into this field of being the ring announcer. Of course, she's been with them since May. She did some ring announcing for before the Impact. She was hosting pre-show events for Impact. So she has some poise behind the camera. But I'm pretty sure she's dating or married to Josh Alexander. Not that that has any bearing on it, just for, if you're familiar with what she looks like, you follow Josh Alexander on Instagram. Like, why does she look familiar? I don't know where she's from. She's always in pictures and stuff with Josh Alexander. But as far as her ring announcing goes, like, pretty impressive. I know that, we have the WWE side of things with the female ring announcing, and that has a certain style. It has a certain pizzazz, and it's eye-catching. And some of the styles, I'm curious how she takes this role and runs with it, because a lot of these ring announcers nowadays are using the platform to stand out. And being, an independent wrestling ring announcer myself, and trying to stand out is important, but also getting your own style, because it's hard to follow in the footsteps of Dave Penzer. It's like playing shortstop for the New York Yankees after Derek Jeter retires.
Yeah, it's big shoes to fill for sure, man. But yeah, you are correct. She is Josh Alexander's spouse. That I think, like you said, she's got a good presence behind the camera. She's familiar with the business. It's a great opportunity for her, man. It's good for her. Looking forward to seeing how she does. Looking forward to seeing where Pinzer lands, because I think you're right. I think we'll see him, whether it's big events in TNA or we see him pop up somewhere in another promotion, man. I'm always glad to hear that voice.
And she definitely has positive energy about it. So she was talking about how excited she is. And that's something, I mean, outside of being excited for the TNA product and the rebrand, everyone was sort of galvanized behind this. And of course, Josh Alexander coming out and talking about this. I mean, she has 20 plus years in wrestling. She was a manager at the ROH roster back in the day. She was a former wrestler training in 2000s. So like she's been around and she's been definitely trying to hone her craft. And it's awesome that she's found a landing spot here in a big way. And it's an important job. As we all know, the ring announcing is the soundtrack. I mean, I may be biased talking about it, but it's the soundtrack of a show. A ring announcer similar to a referee. When it's bad, it's very, very noticeable. But sometimes when it's good, it can actually elevate a show to, beyond where it's supposed to go. And I think she, for her, this is a great opportunity for her to establish her legacy and maybe use it as a platform to go elsewhere, but also cement her legacy as far as ring announcing goes. But I'm excited to see where it goes. I mean, she says she's crazy excited. She wants to rock the mic and make her peers proud. Pretty cool. We'll see if it continues and if they have a multi-person team, because I know that like WWE has a few people and AEW has a few. Obviously, Justin Roberts doesn't do every match, but right now Jade Chung is going to have the lead duties on all these main events.
Yeah, man, that's exciting. Excited to see her get fully involved with with TNA going forward, and yeah, man, it's I think she'll do a good job. Excited to see how it goes.
So saying what up to Tyson. Thank you so much for watching, dude. We appreciate you, my brother. Merry Christmas. Hope you're getting ready for the holidays. And we have Deonna Purrazzo talking about her release from WWE. And this is one of the first times she's talked about this. Of course, she's getting ready to hit the free agency market in 2024. We haven't seen that graphic hit that she's re-signed to TNA. So by all accounts, maybe she's going elsewhere. But, we have this interview with her where she's talking with Wrestling is Life wrestling program. And she was referencing the time in WWE. She was cut back in 2020 and led to her career and her run in Impact Wrestling, where she won the Knockouts Championship 3 times. And the quote here was very interesting because it's very enlightening. And Deonna Purrazzo has been such a big part of the Knockouts division currently where it is. So I know she's been sort of understated after she lost the title, and she was so important to where they are now. And I want to just kind of highlight this quote. She says, "So when I got the phone call that I was released from WWE, it was like, what number is calling me? I'm getting fired right now." But also it was a great conversation at the time because they were like, "I think this is what you want and you're going to end up really happy." And I was like, "I think so too. So thank you." As negative as it was, it kind of ended, at least with Canyon, who I'd worked with for like 7 years up until that point, on and off. It ended up really positive. I think, I wouldn't be me today, and I wouldn't be able to look back and be like, I was part of the problem too. 25-year-old Deonna thought, it's them, it was them, it was them. And now 5 years removed, I can be like, I had a lot to do with that. And now I get to work to form better relationships and to act better, be more professional, and bite my tongue a little bit more. And I learned a lot from the worst times of my life. So it's all about perception, of course. And people in all walks of life go a certain way. When things happen, this is just an example of a small thing, being released from the company, being fired. No one wants that news. That's your dream, to be in WWE and pursue that dream, main event WrestleMania and be on the biggest stage. You get the phone call. It's not the one you want. But I think, it always resonates with me thinking about Cardona when he got the release, and he looked at it as an opportunity. And if you look at these changes as an opportunity, and I think Deonna Purrazzo, she uses it as an opportunity, and now through the benefit of hindsight, looking in the rearview mirror and saying, I needed this to become better than ever. And if she winds up going back to WWE, which I wouldn't be shocked if that happens, because she'd be a great addition to that roster, or if she stays in TNA or goes to AEW, it's well-deserved at this point. And it was because of her time in Impact Wrestling.
Absolutely, man. And it's, like you said, she's been such a cornerstone of the Knockouts division for the last few years. I mean, this, even though it might not have felt like it to her at the time, and it was an opportunity. We would never, I feel like she's elevated herself as in the eyes of fans as being a part of this division. And, when I think of the Knockouts division, Deonna Purrazzo is one of the names that comes to mind as being, one of the key players in that division. So yeah, man, I mean, I think that's awesome that she can look back with hindsight and through a different lens of saying, this was a good thing, and saying probably exactly what she needed at the time.
Do you foresee her re-signing with TNA? Or do you see her taking her chances in WWE or AEW?
I think she resigns, man. I mean, I at least hope she does. I could see. I mean, honestly, I could see her. It's really up to what Deanna wants. I mean, she's such a good talent that I think she'd be attractive to either AEW or WWE as well. But I just, with the momentum that they have with the rebrand, I don't see. I just feel like she's going to be able to get a lot more screen time in TNA. You know, like I said, the AEW women's division, it's definitely improving. You know, it's something that people like to give AEW's women's division a lot of grief. You got to keep in mind, man. I mean, it's a 5-year-old division. You know, you don't. It
And they've
takes
been
time
hit
to
with
build these
injuries
things.
too. The fact that we've obviously had, a lot of injuries to overcome. We just saw the return of Thunder Rosa after how long, and she was such a big piece of what they were doing.
Right. And like, I mean, but you see what they're doing with Timeless Tony Storm. You see what they're doing with Julia Hart. See what they're doing with Sky Blue. See what they're doing with Athena and ROH. Like, they've got some good things going, man. So I mean, she could do well there, I'm sure. And I mean, there's also, I guess, a little bit room in WWE women's division with, Charlotte Flair re-signing that huge deal, but then announcing that she's going to be out for the next 9 months. I mean, it's really, really, I could see her going. Now that we break it down, man, I mean, I could really see her going anywhere, but I selfishly would like to see her stay in TNA.
I completely agree with you. I think really the decision will be in her hand, and I think in WWE it's going to be hard to, because if you look at the way things are structured in TNA, she's immediately a main eventer. She's going to challenge for the biggest title in the world. She's going to be she's going to cycle in and out of main programs, of course, whenever they need her. She might not be featured all the time, similar to how it is now, where we saw her after she lost the Knockout Championship to Trinity. She kind of floated out and she was involved in tag stuff. But with WWE, she has to work her way back up. And I think, I'm not saying it's connected to the Charlotte injury, but I think you're right. I think with that void of Charlotte getting hurt and that other, the other pieces of the division, they're certainly getting older. You know what I mean? Like the Baileys and the Beckys. I'm not saying that, they're too old to do the things they do. They're still great at what they do. But as we know, the lifespan of a wrestling career is not that long, and they have to continue to invest in guys that are established. And sometimes, and it's not a knock on TNA wrestling or even AEW, sometimes they use other promotions to get back to where they wanted to be, which was always WWE. And I'm not saying, can't speak for Deanna. We don't know. Obviously, her dream originally in 2020, like she would have wanted to stay in WWE if someone was able to snap their fingers and make it happen. Maybe she looks at it as a chip on her shoulder. She wants to get back and prove people wrong. And I think she can, as this really finalized package of herself 4 years later, to say, I mean, goddamn, like she is a main event player. And I think maybe she wouldn't resonate. Like, say she came out during the Royal Rumble, would she resonate with the WWE casual audience? Probably not, but I think she would impress very quickly. You put her on TV and feature in a big way. She has a presence. She has a style. She has in-ring awareness, and she has the ability to capture the audience and tell a story in the ring. She's shown all of that in Impact. So watching her closely these last couple months, especially on Brace for Impact, I think she could really shine there. I think she also works a very WWE style. And I think she has a very, larger than life. She carries herself like a superstar. In a lot of ways, she's very similar to Charlotte. Like I really see a lot of the same Charlotte qualities in the best way possible. Not that they look anything like, but even the way they carry themselves, like walking tall and just, they can play a face or a heel larger than life better than a lot of the other women on the roster. I could see having her on this roster in a big way would be, WWE would be silly not to at least consider it. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely, man. That's very, very well said. And I didn't even think about the fact that, I mean, yeah, she's not re-signed with TNA, man. Rumble season's right around the corner. And like you said, would some of the casuals know who she is coming into the Royal Rumble? No, but I mean, she's not that far removed, man, where, people who, I'm sure they're going to be WWE fans that recognize her name if she pops back up in the Rumble. And what a good spot that would be to debut.
yeah, and I also think too. I mean, would it be a downward slide for her to go back to NXT and go there and dominate the division with the likes of what they're doing there? Because the NXT women's division is definitely on the up and up as well. So again, like I think it goes back to what you originally said before. It depends on what she wants, because I think really the ball's in her court. And what does she want from a promotion? Does she want to continue to etch her legacy in the knockouts division? She's reached the highest highs there. Maybe the highs are a little bit higher than the promotion's going back to TNA. It's a larger stage, but I don't know. Again, it goes back to what we were saying before. She is in control of her destiny. And just, it's the perfect time to become a free agent. We always talk about having a career year. I mean, Deonna Purrazzo had one of her best years in her career, and now she gets to reap the benefits by having not a bidding war, but negotiations over her services.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Like I said, it's where she wants to go, man. And like I said, as much as I would selfishly like to see her stay in TNA, I mean, that is one thing you and I have commented a lot on in the last month and a half is, man, Deonna sure is taking a lot of losses, man. And that's typically how you go out of a promotion. So,
and maybe creative knows something we don't know. You know what I mean? Like, I think she was so goddamn protected for the longest time that, seeing her get pinned was almost shocking to me. And she was taking pins left and right at the end of 2023, at least as far as live programming goes. And I think they even cut her tag match off the pay-per-view. Then we never even got that. So it just kind of shows how far she fell off the map for a bit. And like I said, with the roster, and there's only so many slots, then, she eventually cycled back in with the match of Trinity, of course. But, I don't know, maybe she's done it all there. So maybe that plays a part. I don't know. I think maybe we're thinking too much into it, but I'm excited to see what she decides to do.
Yeah, same here.
So we also had an announcement here with TNA Wrestling entering a new deal with a new action figure partner. So it was announced earlier this week that TNA Wrestling and Powertown Wrestling are partnering to produce TNA action figures and accessories. So this is a long-term contract between the two companies. And I'm not sure if we have the details on the years yet, but we have pre-orders for the first series. They're going to be starting as soon as March 2024. They're going to be shipping in August 2024 as well. And then we're going to get the second series scheduled to be shipped in December 2024. So they're wasting no time here, Colton. And TNA and Powertown Wrestling noted that more info, which wrestlers will be featured, will be released in coming weeks. Maybe we'll have an announcement at Hard to Kill. They gave the parameters, and I know the guys on Fig Night, a shout out to Mike and Tom, crushing it as always over there. We're talking about these figures, and I'm curious to hear what they also continue to say as we get more information on it. But the figures are going to be 7-inch scale, sculpted for real life height with scale of other wrestlers. They're going to be talking about 30 modes of articulation. And we're going to get the head rotating, get the arms rotating, the move back and forth. So easy to play with, for the novices out there. But, Powertown was crushing it. I'm not sure if you've seen any of the releases. I mean, they did the Bruiser Brodies, the Stan Hansen, I think Vern Gagne, Magnum TA. Those figures were awesome. So to see TNA kind of get into a relationship with them, who better than Powertown? They've been crushing it. And like at the very least, compared to the MLW figures that came out, no disrespect to them, those left a lot to be desired. The Powertown figures, the likeness was incredible.
Yeah, the Powertown figures, man, you can tell, like, it's Powertown Wrestling is the name of the company. Like, they do wrestling figures. They do not do other figures. So, like, their attention to detail and their passion for wrestling figures, it really comes through their product. Like Ace said, the Bruiser Brody, the Magnum TA, the Stan Hansen. Like, if you go, like, just look up Powertown Wrestling just on Instagram even, and pull up their page. Like, the detail and the level of quality of these figures, man. I mean, you can just see it in the photos. I remember the Stan Hansen one was the first one I ever saw from them. And I was like, man, you can tell, like, the people who made this love wrestling. And it's the Brody one's super impressive. I'm a huge Magnum TA fan. It's an incredible figure, did him a whole lot of justice. So yeah, man, this is super exciting news. I can't wait to see the Josh Alexander figure that they put out.
So if you go back to August, they announced this quiet deal with Epic Toys, and everyone was getting ready for the TNA, or at the time, Impact Wrestling figures to be coming out. And they canceled it, like, because they had gotten the demos of them. And I'm not sure if pictures were released, but they were not happy with not only the time frame, but what the likeness of these wrestlers were. And, Impact said that it did not meet their standards nor the outlined time frame for release. So they ended the agreement with Epic Toys. And this is a blessing in disguise, because, as you mentioned, Powertown continually, that line itself that we were just talking about with Luthez and, Kerry Von Erich, those figures are so great. And Scott D'Amore was talking about, the high quality collectible nature of these figures that you mentioned, the passion of pro wrestling, but you could tell that there's attention to detail where a non-wrestling fan creating this for the sake of creating it would miss those fine details. So I'm expecting that, when we get an Alex Shelley figure and we get a Chris Sabin figure, all the attention to the details, including ring gear and what the accessories are going to be on the money. And that's so important for wrestling fans. When you buy a figure, you want to feel that a wrestling fan made it, or at the very least, a educated person on the product made it.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And good on Impact for canceling a deal with Epic. Didn't meet their standards. Like, good on you for calling that out and pivoting. And I'm obviously happy to wait longer to get TNA or Impact figures that are going to be high quality and something that the company's willing to put their name on. So I'm really excited to see the first mock-ups for these, man, because I know they're going to be cool. Excited. I'm just kind of guessing who the first line's going to be. So that'll be fun.
Can't undersell how important wrestling figures are to wrestling fandom. It could be someone's gateway into wrestling. You talk about wrestling fans who, started with, maybe they had a wrestling figure or their siblings wrestling figure or their uncle's wrestling figures, and it fell into maybe their Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle figures, and all of a sudden they had a Stone Cold Steve Austin and bridged the gap to get them to watch wrestling. Having figures that bring the on-screen product to life, especially for kids. You want to have, I have figures behind me, you do as well. But the initial relationship with wrestling for young fans is the toys and everything, the accessories that go with it. And if the figures suck, no one's buying it. So if you have these superstars, these larger than life characters come to life that you can carry around with you and have all these adventures with and build matches and do cross promotional stuff and match up with your Seth Rollins and your other, Roman Reigns figures, and have the Chris Sabins and the Black Taurus's out there, like that's fun, man. And I think that also helps get people in the door. It's always about bringing people in the door. I'm not all about catering to the casual fans, but it's important to have the initial. When you see it hanging on a shelf, it should catch your eye. Like, who's that? And, get them to buy it.
Yeah, 100%, man. And Power Town figures will absolutely do that.
It's going to be cool to see them in stores. And I'm hoping they're in stores, like Walmart and stuff, that it's not just online exclusive. And I think that's also going to be fun to see next to a Mattel, next to the Jazzware stuff. And, and that's, we talk about, the competition breeding the best product on screen, but it's also the same in the figure community as well, with all these different big promotions, and everyone's vying for the rights for all these different, wrestling figures with Mattel and Jazzwares, and everybody's crushing. We're in the golden age of wrestling, but we're also in the golden age of figures. Nostalgia sells, but also the current day product needs to be appreciated and representation with the figures. Like, we still need the current day product shown on with these figures.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, because they're incredible collectibles, and 20 years from now, looking back on like the current day product, you want to be able to capture it in real time and then be able to, like you said, the nostalgia sell always.
So let's get to blow by blow and talk about our biggest story. And again, this is going to be all just conjecture because we have no answers for you. We're going to be talking about what they're teasing for Hard to Kill. Let's get to blow by blow.
Blow by blow.
All right, the blow by blow here. And of course, as you guys were talking about in the beginning of the show, we had a best of part 1 on air on Access TV, which is why we went a little bit early today. So we've seen all the matches of this year. We don't need to rewatch them. They announced a couple things on the show, like Best Knockouts Tag Team. MK Ultra won that. ABC won the Best Male Tag Team. The Rascals also re-signed. So we'll probably talk about that more next week. That was expected. I didn't even know their contract was up, but I'm sure they just re-upped their deal with TNA over the contract letterhead. But the big story that's coming out of this week is this teasing announcement, because Scott D'Amore was on Busted Open Radio, which is, a premier wrestling platform for conversations. And he was talking about TNA finalizing one of the biggest signings in its history. So Scott D'Amore said here, we're going to have some surprises for you, some unexpected things, including guys. We are right there at the goal line of finalizing one of the biggest signings in TNA. It's something that's going to shake things up here on January 13th. So paired with this quote from Busted Open Radio that's been circling around from everyone was this graphic that dropped on Monday on Instagram with, quote, "Worlds will collide on January 13th. You won't believe who is showing up." So I think the wording there is very crucial because the wording here isn't signed. It says who's showing up. So I'll pass it to you for a second. And of course, this is on the same day, December 21st, where a lot of those 90-day releases are now over, free to go elsewhere. We saw Matt Riddle sign with MLW. Mustafa Ali announced a world tour. He's going to GCW among other places. Who is this going to be? Because looking at the other names that aren't Matt Riddle, not Mustafa Ali, not even Dolph Ziggler, I mean, those guys don't shake things up as far as the promotion goes. Like, what's your initial reaction to this?
My initial reaction is, man, like, I don't know who it could be, because the graphic on Instagram and then Scott D'Amore's quote on Busted Open almost, it confuses me a little bit, because they talk about it's really going to shake things up. You'll never believe who's coming, but it doesn't, the graphic doesn't make it sound like somebody's signing. It just sounds like somebody's going to be at the show and it's going to be a huge name. But then Scott comes on Busted Open Radio today and he says the company's finalizing one of the biggest signings in history. So, like, my initial reaction is it a New Japan signing? Is it somebody? I mean, I don't know, man. I mean, because we know that we're getting Okada at the show, but I feel like that, the fact that he's already announced and then we sign him, that would be a fumble on my part, in my opinion, and I don't foresee them doing that. They wouldn't fumble like that. So as far as the 90-day releases for WWE,
I mean, dude, look at the names. I mean, we mentioned Mustafa Ali, Matt Riddle, and Dolph Ziggler being the biggest names, because the rest of them could be good fits, but I don't think it would be you make a graphic and tease it, like a Rick Boogs and a Dabba-Kato and Elias. Like, they're fun to think about where they could be on the roster. That's not someone you advertise as like shaking up. But I also think the signing and also this person showing up could be two mutually exclusive things. You know what I'm saying?
Or they don't have to be mutually exclusive. Yeah, so it could be
exactly.
Two different people we're talking about. Okay, so I was approaching it as that being mutually exclusive. So, yeah, that's man, yeah, because I don't see Rick Boogs as being a signing that shakes up. No matter how much I like the guy, yeah, I don't think that's going to be something that they're going to preview as one of the most unexpected signings. I don't know, man. Who are you? Who do you think it's going to be?
So my signing, like, I know everyone saw Dolph Ziggler at the last pay-per-view, but I think Dolph Ziggler is probably signing. I don't think that's going to be the person who's showing up, because, man, and I know this is tinfoil hat stuff. We were talking about it with this relationship with Endeavor and the app, and it opens up the inroads to WWE. Dude, I can foresee them allowing CM Punk to make an appearance at Hard to Kill. And I think it could, because, like, we know that the inroad is there, the conversation there, and who knows if that was part of the negotiation where prior to coming to WWE, we know he was at Bound for Glory. We know he was having conversation with Scott D'Amore, so complimentary of the roster. Who's to say he doesn't just show up? I'm not saying CM Punk's gonna have a program over in WWE and versus TNA or something like that, but I can totally see CM Punk coming there and putting his stamp of approval just to get eyes on the product as a gesture of good faith over on there. Because of course he's not going to be active. You want to keep him healthy, and for Philly WrestleMania against Seth Rollins, you don't want to risk anything happening in Vegas or something like that. But this could be an opportunity for Paul Levesque, Scott D'Amore to start this new era of saying, we have a talent exchange program where we're going to be having some different inroads to have younger talent come over. And it's not always going to be as big a name as CM Punk, but it's going to be an opportunity for both sides. Like, Chad Gable can come and work over here, and Yuya Uemura, when he's not busy in New Japan Pro Wrestling, maybe he'll come over to NXT and work over there. This is tinfoil hat type of stuff. And when you say worlds will collide, to me, that makes it sound like it has to be bigger than just, hey, Nick Nemeth signed over here in TNA. It's something bigger. It has to be.
Sure. And when you say worlds colliding, like, we get crossover with New Japan all the time already. So that's not necessarily anything that's going to really blow our socks off, unless maybe we get, so that this is one thing that I didn't think of. First of all, to comment on what you said, I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility at all. And I don't think I don't even know if I would go as far as to call that tinfoil hat-esque, man. I think that you're really onto something there. And the fact that, man, because AEW, I think, really touts themselves as the company who opened the Forbidden Door. I mean, they have a pay-per-view named Forbidden Door where they cross-promote with New Japan every year. Like, what a kick in the face that would be, or what a slap in the face that would be from WWE to AEW to be like, oh man, you want to talk about a Forbidden Door? Punk's going to be on fucking TNA's like first show of the year. Like that would be, I mean, that would be complete pandemonium, man. I mean, that would blow there's no more. The forbidden doors have been taken off the proverbial Jeep, at that point. I hope that Nick Nemeth is a signing, man. I think this would be a great place for him. But going back to, talking about worlds colliding, I mean, we already have Bullet Club presence, both ABC in TNA. What if we got David Finlay and the New Japan Bullet Club showing up, man? I could see that being, I mean, that was something that we entertained earlier this year, talking about how that could be a good crossover story in Impact. I mean, that could be pretty neat.
I would love that personally. And I don't know if that warrant, to me, that would be like almost a Vikingo graphic that you pop up and say David Finlay showing up. Like, I feel like the fact that he teased it in this way on Busted Open Radio and saying worlds will collide, you won't believe who's showing up, means it's a temporary person who just be making a guest appearance. And I'm not thinking, because it can go one of two ways. It could be this inroad with TNA and WWE having this working relationship informally, or it could be a precursor, a one-off agreement that CM Punk made in his negotiation to come back to the company saying, hey, I would like to help them get off the ground. Can I do this?
Yeah.
Would you allow me to do this? And this is not Vince McMahon's WWE. This is a completely different monster that we're dealing with. So, and as you said, Spite's a hell of a drug here. So we could have obviously WWE saying, hey, fine, come over there, come out and cut a promo. You have Cult of Personality hitting in Vegas. It would light the wrestling world on fire, bring eyes to the product, and you would hope that they'd stick around and check it out. And it would paint WWE in a very good light. Like, look how giving they are. And it's a good spin for them, especially we're always trying to, in this fast moving news cycle, be the hot commodity of who's doing the right thing. Paul Levesque is everyone's papa now. Everyone loves him. Everyone's talking his good graces, that he's the most progressive mind in wrestling for a lot of people. It's him, 1A, 1B, as far as Shawn Michaels and Triple H are the two bookers of the year in a lot of people's minds. And hey, well deservingly, they've crushed it this year. But I think the interesting conversation is probably going to be, if Punk shows up, was it this like lasting, lingering agreement that he agreed to in his one-off negotiations outside of when he left AEW? Or is this a precursor of things to come where we may get, I wouldn't say a Forbidden Door show, but this like talent exchange where, the relationship, I was talking about this on Wrestling Tonight, WWE and AEW have adversarial relationship because they want to be on equal footing. AEW is refusing to be perceived as lesser than. TNA may be okay with being lesser than, similar to ECW when they came over. Like, they're helping out this smaller brand because it might help damage the competition. Similar to how WWE was helping ECW because they wanted WCW out of business. So I think a part of that is maybe the same energy we're seeing in 2024 with WWE helping TNA to help arm them as a militia to take on AEW. And almost, they were used to be allies. Now he's on the other side with big bad WWE.
Well, and that's what, so the one thing that, so I have a couple questions in that situation that come up. One of which is, let's say it's Punk. Let's say Punk comes in. Is he just coming in and showing up and saying, hey, I love TNA, happy to be here? Is he coming in and doing like a short program with somebody?
I don't think he does a program, especially with, maybe down the line somewhere, but I don't think on the build to WrestleMania, you can't risk getting, especially with his history of recent injuries, you don't want to risk getting him hurt before this Rollins program. I think It's going to be a good faith promo, showing up in street gear and just for the moment of the music hitting in Vegas for everyone to get eyes on the product. That would be my guess of how it's done.
So I've got another theory now that we've been talking about it for a little bit, and it would seem pretty fitting. I don't know. I think that's dangerous territory for TNA to get into. I'm just, at least with Punk currently, and not saying that it would absolutely put eyes on the product. It would light the world on fire. But TNA has a really good working relationship with AEW right now as well. And like, they don't, I feel like having Punk coming out and cutting one promo, not that TK is a vindictive dude, but if we start going down that road, obviously, like, there's going to be some sort of repercussions. Do you risk having Will Ospreay on a show ever again because he's signed with AEW by getting into bed on a talent exchange with WWE in a situation like you mentioned, similar to how ECW was back in the day, with not worrying about being lesser than and just taking what comes their way to get more eyes on their product, but as a byproduct, shutting down the competitor? So I feel like that could potentially be a slippery slope. And one thing, with this being the first pay-per-view back as TNA, now the gears are turning in my mind of what if we get a TNA name? I mean, because Punk's got a, like what if we get a TNA legend back that is somewhere else? And the name that comes to mind when I think about that, especially given their relationship with AEW, is what if Samoa Joe shows up in Hard to Kill? That would be, especially because I'm starting to lean that he's not winning this title at World's End. I'm starting to lean that way. I mean, I've been on both sides of it at this point, but we'll see how things go at World's End. But I'm starting to lean that Joe doesn't win the title there. Or God, what if he even does? What if he won the title and he shows up with the AEW World Title at TNA? How wild would that be?
I guess it's a crossroad for the promotion to see who they're going to be kind of working with and what is the benefit of TNA working with either side. I guess I have to consider. Is it, do they want to go to the higher heights with WWE, or they want to continue this fruitful relationship with AEW? Who knows?
Yeah, hard to say, man. But I'm gonna put my hand. I'm gonna for now. I'm gonna put my theory on Joe. I think that would be an easy thing. Because I mean, a lot of people, they think about TNA, they think about Samoa Joe. This would be.
I like it.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And for where he's placed on the card right now on AEW, I think that's the last that nobody is thinking about that right now. That wouldn't be a possibility. So yeah, I don't think he's a sign. I like what you said about the signing, and you're never going to believe who's showing up being not mutually exclusive. Because that,
dude, I do like that. Now the more you break it down, but I could see it going the other way. But it is a crossroad for the promotion, no matter how you slice it.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, you're definitely going to bigger heights with WWE, but who in the long run, who's more actually invested in your success with
100%.
talent sharing? And I feel like at this point, it's AEW is probably more, even though they might not be directly invested in TNA's success, their mindset and their idea of how to do business, I feel like, is a lot more. It's a lot closer in style to TNA than it is WWE's.
And they'll treat them as an equal. Where in WWE they would be looked at as lesser than. They wouldn't be equals. If any of the TNA talent show up on WWE in any capacity, if say this is a hypothetical situation that would happen, they would be perceived as lesser than. Like, if Moose shows up on WWE television, which is not happening. I'm not saying he's bringing the belt over there. He wouldn't be looked at in the same light as a Roman Reigns. They wouldn't put him in the ring together and act like that. On AEW side, they probably would, because I think Tony Khan has a different mindset. And this is a different world, though. Paul Levesque is a completely different mind than Vince McMahon, the way he looks at things. But, they don't just answer to Triple H, though. There's a bigger, higher company that maybe, as Endeavor, like we said, is powering the streaming service. They may see a value of having this underneath of, maybe having a relationship with a smaller promotion is, because again, history does repeat itself. And the ECW relationship is a good microcosm to look at about what they were doing. And don't take for a second, just again, the hatred that WWF had for WCW, let ECW be featured on Monday Night Raw in the mid 90s. So that was a big piece of it. And who's to say that they don't sweeten the pot for a TNA to help arm TNA, to help weaken and help strengthen them? Even, you hear all those rumors that's been denied vehemently from Paul Heyman about cashing a paycheck to keep them in business, to help keep their talent and stop them from having their talent go over to WCW, and all of that to keep them alive. And I don't know, maybe that also TNA is just benefiting from both sides hating each other. Maybe they're Sweden here in the situation.
That's true, man. And so to go back on that vein of WWE talent sharing with TNA, I'll do you one better, man. I think this might even have, just staying in the same mindset of homage to TNA and big names for TNA, something that I think, at least to TNA fans, might have a bigger impact than Punk showing up would be AJ Styles showing up.
Hell yeah.
He just came back. First of all, looking like $1 million fucking dollars. Like
looking like 85 Hogan out there.
Yeah, baby. He is just shredded. He is so beefed up, man. I don't know if people are getting that, I don't know if people are getting, I don't know if people are getting back on the gas now that Endeavor's involved or what, but
well, they took the wellness policy off the WWE official website. So just saying.
All right. Well, excellent.
I'm not saying one or the other. I'm just saying they removed that caveat. Maybe it's being edited.
Yeah.
Maybe the website's being fixed. But right now, there's no section about the wellness policy. And as of 10:51 p.m. on 12/21/2023, maybe that's fixed by tomorrow. Who knows?
I don't know. We'll see. But all I know is that it's just very timely that it's not on the website, and AJ Styles and Randy Orton come back looking absolutely incredible.
They were saying that, they were talking about this on Wrestling Observer Live. They were talking about TRT and about how a lot of athletes use it, that it's not, the testosterone replacement therapy that's happening is different than, these performance enhancing drugs. And there's more, more studies done about the benefits and being able to help reinvigorate muscles that maybe wouldn't have the same ability to bounce back, especially at their age. But, as time goes on, technology does improve, our understanding of diet and workout. But, Randy Orton and AJ Styles look better than they've ever looked. And I'm not making any accusations as to why. Like, I'm just proud of the dudes for going out there and crushing it. Because AJ Styles, like you said, he looks better than he's ever looked. And that's, that says a lot. He's been crushing it since the mid 2000s.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talk about a guy that loves, like Will Ospreay says, he talks about being a TNA kid. Like AJ Styles was his guy. Like AJ Styles is who made him want to be a wrestler. AJ's got love for that company. And yeah, he just got back on screen with WWE, but he's not too deep into anything yet. I mean, shit, man, that would be incredible. I mean, that would, of all the people that we have talked about, that would be my pick as a TNA fan.
Dude, if they break out the old AJ Styles theme too, with like the classic presentation, he comes out. I like that idea. Honestly, I think the punk stuff would bring more eyes to the product on the initial, the casual fan. But as far as the capture and the nostalgia fan, if Joe and or AJ Styles shows up, and maybe they are the bridge to bring two hated companies together, you have, a nice loan of Joe and a loan of AJ Styles for one night, have them come in the ring and maybe present the new championship to, I don't know, man. We're spinning our wheels. It'd be fucking awesome.
I'm getting chills just thinking about that shit, man. Especially if both of them were to show up. Like you talk about two of TNA's biggest legends coming from rival companies.
What's the harm? You put AJ Styles in a Georgia hat, he pops out there, gives the title, and same thing with Joe. Put some streets on him. You fly him out there to Vegas. What's the harm? They can hit the casino, they hit the strip for a little bit and go through their thing. Like you show up for a little bit. That's all you need to do, and it helps build such good faith among wrestling fans that you're able to do this for TNA and the legacy and wrestling fans, whether you're WWE or AEW.
I'm so much more excited about this pay-per-view now. Not that there was any not that there was any lack of excitement on my part for Hard to Kill, man. But man, yeah, just fantasy booking who this could be. Scott D'Amore, you brilliant man. Way to put the breadcrumbs out there for us, man. And like you said, Ace, with it being with Endeavor, this is something we were talking about last week, with Endeavor being involved in the streaming deal. That is another case made for the fact that it would make sense for a little bit of back and forth between WWE and TNA because they both are in bed with Endeavor to some degree.
Absolutely. And guys, let us know what you think about it in the comments and leave us some comments. Maybe at Acefield Retro, send me a message at mullet.mania. Let us know what you think, because I think we're too far off base. Are we stretching ourselves too far away from the scuba diving net? Are we getting loopy out there out to sea? I really think these things are a possibility, because when you look at the wording, I know we're looking at it like it's a ransom note, but you won't believe who is showing up, which means showing up doesn't mean staying. Showing up means coming in for a cup of coffee, having a nice little, a cookie, piece of cake, and then leaving. AJ Styles fits that bill. CM Punk fits that bill. And I'm not saying CM Punk has any sort of, he's been in TNA. That run was kind of understated when he was part of Raven's crew. But Punk we know how complimentary he was of the promotion prior to signing with WWE. And that could be one of the final things he checks off his box when he said, hey, I'll come over to WWE, make my return. Here's my leverage. I want this piece. Can you please do this for me?
Yeah, and also too, my favorite part about this is you won't believe who's showing up. That leaves it open-ended to where it might not just be one person. It could be, like we said, man, like, could you imagine a world where both Joe and AJ show up? Oh man, just get me in all the feels. I'm so excited for TNA.
All right, let's get the shock, and I'll give our final wrap-up preview next week's show.
Shock and awe.
All right, next week will be our last show of 2023. We're going to give our superlatives of what we thought for the year. A couple categories. Of course, stay tuned to Turnbuckle Tavern wrestling tonight for the tourneys airing on January 1st, 2024. All our cumulative awards for all of wrestling, but we're going to give a little bit of conversation about the best 2023 next week. We'll be talking about the news, of course, all the signings I'm sure out there, and previewing Hard to Kill as we get closer to it. But Colton, what's going on your end?
Man, just gearing up for the holidays, man. I'm excited for the tourneys. Really, really stoked to see where those awards go to. And man, it's just kind of hard to believe that, man, our last show of 2023 is next week. It's just, it's been, that'll be, I believe, our 28th episode of Brace for Impact. Man, it's been an absolute blast of a ride, man. Just kind of looking back is just feeling extremely grateful to be doing this show with you and just to be covering this amazing product, and just grateful to all the fans and all the listeners out there, man. Thank you to everybody who's hung with us and stuck with us and jumped on this roller coaster of Impact Wrestling, now transitioning back into TNA going forward into the new year. Just, man, just hope everybody has a safe and wonderful holiday out there, man. I know Ace and I are both Christmas guys, man. We love this time of year, and it's been a kind of a marathon getting here, man, but it's finally upon us.
Absolutely. And you guys can follow us at Turnbuckle Tavern. Check us out, turnbuckletavern.com. Hope you guys all enjoy your Christmas. Follow me at Acefield Retro. Follow him at Mullet.Mania. We'll be back next week talking about all Impact / TNA. We appreciate you guys listening and watching. We'll catch you guys next week after a while.